Hi, I'm Sophie Roth, and I am one of the co-founders of Bach Education.
And hello, I'm Rakia Johnson. I am the other co-founder of Bach Education, and this is the very first podcast for To a Degree.
Yeah, and we're here to bring you information about college admissions and the A to Z of higher education.
Everything there is to know about it is everything and anything there is to know about higher education. We wanted to start this off since it's our first one to discuss our credibility and why this is something that we're very passionate about and why it's something we would want to put together and how the Bach Education kind of was created. So I guess between the two of us, we have like, decades.
Yeah, got to put a number on it.
Actually, over 20 years of experience working in higher education, doing everything from teaching to recruiting to managing academic programs. Yeah. So I think it's a part of the things that we've seen and how we really want to kind of where this idea was born out of, right?
Exactly. And our experience on campus, and that's where Rakia and I met, and we're going to say trauma bonded, but it's fine. We are okay now. But no, we had actually a really excellent experience. I think we both really enjoy and are passionate about working with students and about having access to higher education and really the sort of transformative experience that earning a degree can be. And so our experience was really wonderful in the end. And I think we got to meet a lot of amazing students, both from the U.S. and internationally. It's a very kind of special experience to work on a campus with a very large population, especially of international students. We really enjoyed that part and enjoyed being able to travel to different universities and partnering and recruiting. It was a really great experience in the end.
Absolutely. I think the important part, and I kind of the aspect of Bach, and we'll kind of get into some more description of what exactly Bach education is the transformative piece. And that's the part of college that is really hard to explain to students, right? So and to parents. So in fact, just earlier today, Sophie was saying, I don't know how my parents just let me go off on my own at 18 to live in New Orleans.
Yeah. And I'm very responsible, but yeah, I wouldn't let me go now. I don't know. That was also a great experience though.
But I think it's part of that. I mean, there's no preparing you for it. Like you really just kind of get kicked out of the nest and you go. And I think that's the part of it where it's like, there's the education piece, of course. But that's why it's so important to find the right school that works for you, because it is a long commitment. 4 years is a long time. It is an expensive commitment. Right. And then how you do it can be less expensive and more expensive. But either way, it's still a huge life, time, and monetary investment. And you don't want to squander that, even in the sense of there are kids where it's like, yeah, it's just not going to work for me. Great. Don't take out thousands of dollars of student loans if you're not ready. And that's very important too. Right. So I don't know if people are really prepared for the transformation that will take place, because you don't know. And I can't explain it to you in a way that's going to make sense. And so just a part of our experience of seeing students come in, and it was just wild to see like a freshman come in at 18 and to see what they were like by the time they graduated at like 21. It's
incredible.
It's incredible.
Incredible growth. And I mean, we say that about undergraduate students, but like our graduate students sometimes came in very raw. And then they also had a growth journey. And so good for them.
That's true.
So, it's about a full journey as well. And we want people to take this decision of choosing a college as deeply and as seriously as they do selecting a soulmate. This is, a very important, transformative relationship in your life. And like we said, it's 4 years of your time. It's tons of your money. At least 4 years.
Per year.
So, let's take it as seriously as we would choosing a soulmate.
And partner. And, in some ways that relationship lasts longer.
Yeah. Yeah, because your career prospects, I mean, it changes the trajectory of your life.
You
it's
met
like
your
having,
husband in college.
I did meet my husband in college. It also can affect your relationships, your romantic relationships,
Right.
or friendships, and your career and professional networks. I mean, the impact that choosing a college has on sort of the rest of your life is really impactful. And, you know, it's sort of the difference between having, like, I don't know, a healthy relationship that, you know, goes its course and 4 years later you're both better people at the end of it, or having like a toxic relationship, somebody who like bleeds you dry and like you walk away with no degree and oh my gosh. So let's
Or
make
you
good
walk away
decisions.
with the degree, but you're like, was it worth it? Was it worth the beating?
Yes, the abuse to a degree.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot to think about. And I think our philosophy as both entrepreneurs under, you know, creating Bach Education and what we want to talk about on this podcast is this philosophy behind giving this the gravitas that it needs. Let's think about this relationship as one of the most core relationships for the rest of your life, the relationship with your alma mater. And by the way, alma means soul, so it is like choosing a soulmate.
Oh, there you go.
If you like wordplay, like some of us.
So I guess, why don't we start, Sophie, and just kind of explain to you what is Bach?
So what we've created with Bach is a really modern solution for connecting students, high school students, with universities and recruiters. So what we've seen as recruiters in a former life is that there's a massive disconnect between schools looking to do outreach with universities and interested students and students who have heard of the college or even know what sort of, you know, subject areas they have. So there's this disconnect. Schools are, you know, buying lists of cold leads. They're sending those lists to call centers and they're having people call up. I mean, I don't know any teenagers who are answering phone numbers they don't know. I don't know any teenagers who have voicemail set up.
Adults that are
I don't know a lot of teenagers who read unsolicited emails. So there's a disconnect. These schools are trying to reach out to these students, and these students are just not receptive to the types of sort of old school communication methods. So we're going to solve that disconnect. And the way we're doing it is we're going to make it look and feel like basically a dating app. So with the ease of literally just a swipe, you get to input your student profile. Schools have input their profiles and admissions criteria, and then you get matched.
You match.
And you can filter out anything you want. You can filter for HBCUs. You can filter by geography. You can filter by international programs that offer degrees in English. So there's all these ways to really fine-tune how you're searching for the right college for yourself. And we've simplified it down to a swipe. So you swipe right or you swipe left, and then you save all of your research. And so I think by being able to do that, eventually we hope that, you know, university partners are going to join us, and then you'll be able to communicate directly in-app with recruiters, which would be a really easy way to kind of solve that disconnect. And then when you're ready, you're sort of dating, right? You're dating these universities while you're looking for the right program for yourself. And then by the end of it, you've sort of met the right one, and then you apply and hopefully you get admitted, and you should have a sense of whether you're admissible or not. And so you shouldn't be a lot of surprises. And then you go, you sort of, you know, you take the plunge, so to speak.
And then you start out your career at that school. What's also really important to note of schools, and like most schools, I guess, what we've seen in terms of recruiting, it's not uncommon to have multiple schools. So in terms of like, you know, students will do community college and then they will take basic courses, right? Your history, your basic math course that you need to take, and you do it at a community college because it tends to be a little bit cheaper,
right?
A little bit more cost effective to do it that way, right? That doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to have that lasting relationship with an alma mater. And so even like looking back on it, right, and going to like a mega, you know, state school, you can kind of see too of that's just not an experience for everyone. So I think one of the things that we want to talk about is how we ended up at the schools that we ended up, because I think
Right.
that also lends to a bit of credibility of how we managed to be at our colleges and what that experience was like and what it was like choosing it.
And there was more than one path to the right one,
Correct.
to the right university, and a little bit of it, sometimes it's just luck, kind of dumb luck. But yeah, go ahead and talk about your journey first.
Well, and I think it's important to just kind of note that sometimes I lost my train of thought. Don't get old, kids. When you're going through that whole process, that just because, right, like multiple schools offer a degree in physical education, right? Like if you want to become a trainer, there's several schools. And sometimes, right, you apply for the school that you want and it doesn't work out or you don't get admitted, which is totally fine. You have the other school that you're applying to, right? So both schools may have what you need, but not everyone has all of everything, right? And so then as you're going to, you can still find that degree at another place. So like my higher education journey is very interesting, I would say, quite diverse.
Yeah, that's a good way.
So I started out, I was one of those kids who I was like, well, I'm going to go to college and I will go anyway. Like I could have gone to college anywhere. Like it was like, hey, don't worry about the cost. Just where would you like to go and what would be a good school for you? And so I was like, fine, I'll go
Yeah. The world is your oyster.
I should have been more adventurous, but I was not. I ended up in Virginia. From Dallas, Texas, into Lynchburg, Virginia, where I went to Liberty University. At the time, Jerry Falwell was alive, and so it was like Jerry Falwell School, and it was quite Christian, where you quite literally, I got turned away. If you've ever heard anything about Liberty, that's like they turn girls away if their skirts are too short, and this is true. Your skirt can be too short, and you are not allowed to go into the cafeteria.
So not for everyone.
I'm not really sure why it was for me at that time. Transferred out. Could you believe it? And honestly, they were struggling with their accreditation, actually. And so I'm very fortunate. My mom is not... my mom is really good about being a sounding board. And so, like, she's like, just, decisions you need to make for yourself kind of thing.
Good for her.
And, yeah, I mean, that's sometimes great. I don't know how great it is at like 18.
You have to make your own mistakes. That's okay.
You do have to make your own mistakes. She does say sometimes the best lessons are bought, meaning you'll pay for that mistake or you'll pay for that decision. So, which is very true. And so, she was fine with me going away, crying in the parking lot, dropping me off, but she was fine with me going away. And, she never said anything about being upset, but I was like, yeah, the school's really struggling with their accreditation. We're not really sure how things are going to go, which is, again, not abnormal.
Right, but I will
colleges.
say, if we're comparing it to relationships, like giant red flag.
That is a big red flag.
Big old toxic red flag. Just accreditation. We'll talk about that in later episodes, I'm sure, but, keep it in mind.
It was a thing. And so I got a packet in the mail of Texas colleges, like about 2 weeks later.
Snail mail.
Because it was like, it wasn't just, hey, here's some college. I mean, there were brochures from colleges in this package. And I was like, no cookies, just
thanks, Mom.
College schools. So then at that time I was like, oh, I'll apply to UT.
University
Austin.
of Texas, Austin. Yeah.
And not the other orange school, Tennessee, the burnt orange, Texas, UT, and or University of Toronto. So
there's a lot of UTs. Actually.
There are a lot. There actually really are.
But only one.
Only one
University
matters.
of Texas, Austin. Yeah,
there's
right.
only the one that matters. So I applied to UT Austin, and I applied into the School of Communication and Advertising. At that time, this was in the 90s.
Oh.
And it was at that time, UT Austin had the largest enrollment in the country of students. And their advertising program in the College of Communication was probably the third ranked best advertising program. I was dumb and naive and didn't think that was a problem. I was like, I'll apply.
Well, and for some students, a big school is, an attractive quality.
Right.
Not necessarily for everyone, but at least you find a place.
I mean, So I ended up getting in. And so I got into Texas, and I remember calling and asking about the status of my application, and the person answered the phone, and I said, well, I'm calling about the status of my application. And she says, oh, you got in. She was shocked.
Oh.
Because it was like a mid-semester transfer. Like, she was also shocked.
Good for you.
They were like, congrats. And I was like, wow, look at that.
Yeah. Off-season admissions, it was always a thing.
Right. And so I, again, very naive. And I was coming from this small, private Christian institution to where we would pray before class started with our professors to UT Austin in the 90s. It was a switch.
Yeah.
I was like,
culture shock.
I remember walking into, first off, I didn't even have a dorm. So I go into the campus because I was just thought it'll be a part of the whole process. That's what it was like when I went to Liberty. They just
found you a bed.
They were like, yeah, like, you're going to stay in this dorm. Like, there wasn't an option. And so, I remember walking into the housing department on campus. And so the director didn't know that my mom and I were standing there. And so we were talking to the young lady at the front, and we're like, we're looking for on-campus housing, blah, blah, blah.
And then they laughed into your face. No.
Basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
He was like,
hard to find
apply for housing a year before they apply for the school. Like, there's no housing on campus. Mind you, I'm a mid-semester transfer. So.
Basically homeless at this point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, la, la, la. And my mom's like, what? And then he realizes that, oh, you're talking about these dummies asking for housing on campus. Mm-hmm. Again, at that time, Texas had the largest enrollment. And then I think by my sophomore year, basically Texas kicked all of upperclassmen off campus. They made it like a lottery system.
Exactly.
And so, like, you could, because they just had so many additional students than they had on-campus housing. Mm-hmm. And so we had a friend that I grew up with who lived in Austin. And I was like, I'll just live with David, Mom. And Mom was like, first off, no.
You went from Christian school to living with a boy. I don't know.
I'm going to live with David off campus. I've got a car.
Yeah. Too much in one day for a mom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a little much. And so I remember we went to some, actually they gave us like co-op living options, which I don't know if you've ever seen these co-ops. They're just hippies. They're just filled with really fun-loving hippies. Yeah. And I mean, these are
communal living. Yeah.
Communal living. And at this point, as we're going to look at them, mind you, I'm still a freshman. Mm-hmm. No, I was in my sophomore year. Okay. And because I did one full year at Liberty and then switched mid-semester the second year. We go, and there was this guy, they're all grad students. So I'm like, 19 at this point. And the other people are like 24, 20, like they're
big difference at that age.
Yeah, they're a little seasoned. Mm-hmm. And they've been living off campus in this communal co-op living. I'm like, we all share the kitchen, kind of thing. And I'm like, this is cute. And Mom's being like, absolutely not. And so then we did get a call and said, hey, we do have temporary housing on campus. Good. And so we walked into Jester, and my mom's like, well, this can't be the dorm. There's like guys coming in here. And I was like, oh.
Not Liberty University.
It's different. I ended up going to, I chose. And so when I dropped off, I just asked my mom to drop off the mail. Like, I applied for everything on my own. I was just that kind of kid. And I did that probably my junior year. So I had got admitted to Liberty before before I by the beginning of my
early
year.
admission,
very early admission. So I just wasn't super concerned about it. I didn't really apply to other places. Like, that was the place I wanted, and that's what I got, and so that was kind of enough for me.
Yeah.
I didn't think that I would transfer at all. Like,
maybe
it's just not an option.
That's why it's so important to do your research on the front end and make sure that you've figured out all the options.
Keeping with the analogy of a relationship, things change. Relationships change. People change. And doesn't mean that they're bad or it was a terrible experience or anything like that. It just wasn't right.
Wasn't the right
or
fit.
Things just don't stay right, So it just really wasn't a good fit for me.
Right.
at that time. So later moving to UT Austin, which is where I finished up and graduated from with my bachelor's degree. I did do some community college, just going home for the summer and just taking some few classes just to knock them out, because I did transfer. So I did lose some credits from one school to the next. And so
yeah, that's also important to note, just because you're transferring and just because you're going from one accredited university to another does not mean that they will accept it, nor will they necessarily accept every community college credit. So you do want to make sure that you're doing your research.
Yes. And that, things will transfer. And so it worked out in the end. I am a very proud Longhorn. I'm happy to be a Longhorn. It's important
Except during
to me.
football season, is that?
No, like football season is not really that big of a deal. It's only Texas.
It's only Texas.
Actually,
they're coming back.
The high school, championship rings are like rival Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Although my high school did not. Like, my high school was not a big football school. We did have some players, though.
We both grew up in Texas, so it's like, Friday Night Lights.
Friday
football.
Night Lights, for sure.
Yeah.
My brother played when I was a kid, and so went to a lot of football games.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big part of the culture, and some people do make decisions about going to school based on the football teams. So
I did go to
don't knock it
to football games at Liberty, and it was quite the different experience kind of football game at UT Austin.
Yeah,
particularly as a student, like it's 1,000% more fun going as a student on the student side of the stadium than it is like as an
even if they're not winners,
right? Like even if you still love it, and same with like basketball.
Right.
I didn't get the Kevin Durant years. And honestly, I got the Chris Sims years.
I will say, so all full disclosure, I live in Austin and Rakia is also in Texas,
San Antonio. Yeah.
So we, of course, love, our UT sports teams. But I will say my favorite team right now to go to is the UT women's volleyball team. And they're incredible.
They are.
And it is an experience to go to those games. And so I love that even though we're not in college or working on a campus, we still get those little experiences here and there.
Yeah. I would say I should have gone to more swim meets. I'm like,
there's so many sports, and you could go as an athlete or a spectator, and that's another really unique part of, I think, American universities that might not be there with the international universities, but the sports culture rivals professional sports in many places. Yeah. So it's a cool part of college here.
It is, yeah. And so that's how I ended up at Texas X.
Yeah. And my experience was pretty different than Rakia's. We talk about that a lot. But I am the child of immigrants. And so they just weren't as in tune, I guess, about sort of the American, university admissions process. And so it was a lot of learning and educating, kind of flying blind a little bit. And I, just like Rakia, I just got mailboxes full of pamphlets and brochures, and you just kind of rifled through the papers, and I guess their marketing was really important. You made some choices based on that. I also had the opportunity to be flown out to a couple of schools that I applied to, which made me feel really special. And then I found out it was for I don't know, like a minority weekend, and it sort of took away a little bit of the glam of it. But I remember I flew out to Ohio State University, and their whole campaign was like, we're just like a little bigger than UT Austin. Like we're the biggest, or that was like their whole thing. And then I flew out to a women's college, which made my dad very happy and me less so. It was not a great fit, but those are actually, I think, the only two colleges I went to because they sent me there. And so every other university I applied to, I didn't have the opportunity to go tour, which made making the decision harder. And, we didn't have as many online resources. And so really you're kind of flying blind a lot of it. In the end, I chose to go to Tulane University in New Orleans. And again, I hadn't gone to the campus. My parents had actually visited New Orleans before and seen the campus, but they didn't have like a lot of in-depth knowledge about it. I didn't know what I wanted to study, so I went in sort of undeclared, and I just kind of went with the flow, which is very not me. If you know me, I'm not very spontaneous. I'm a planner. But I think at this stage in my life, it was just pretty open to, what there was ahead of me. In the end, I ended up pursuing a degree in Latin American studies. And I studied like the politics and economics of South America, which is where my family was from. So it was really nice. And I think one of my favorite pieces of studying at Tulane was also the ability to go study abroad for a year. And that made my whole experience like just completely different. And if I could have earned a degree abroad, I think that would have also been a really good option for me. But at least doing one full year abroad was wonderful. And I had great professors, and it was a like small to medium sized campus, which was good for me. I think I would sort of be overwhelmed by a really large campus like UT Austin or Ohio State. I think those weren't good fits for me. So I'm glad that I ended up at this size campus. I will say it wasn't without challenges, because I was at Tulane during Hurricane Katrina. That it hit move-in weekend, or like right after move-in weekend of my sophomore year and my poor brother's freshman year. And we basically left our things, and mind you, we're like hurricane pros. I've lived in Miami, I've lived in Houston, we lived in New Orleans for a while. So like I know what to do in a hurricane. We evacuated very quickly, left all of our stuff on campus, and then did not get to come back for like 6 months. And I don't want to compare my situation with, the residents of New Orleans and what they all went through, especially if they like rode out the hurricane. It was pretty devastating, and it took a toll on, I think, a lot of the students as well. And that was a hard year. I had to go to, well, luckily Rice University, which while I was in Houston was close-ish for Houston, and we got to go there for a semester. Learned very quickly that was not the right fit for me, and it is the right fit for other people, not for me. And so really happy to go back to Tulane once the school and the city opened back up, and was glad to be a part of sort of that rebuilding place for New Orleans. And I go back a lot, and I love it, and I love that I got the opportunity to live there, and it's a very special place, and Tulane's a really special school, and I'm really proud of the degree that I got there. And so I had a great experience for my undergrad.
It is, you reminded me, Sophie, again, of just how different our backgrounds were when it came to college. As you mentioned, I didn't get to go to a lot of colleges, and whereas I had a cousin that played college basketball, and so we went to watch him play. And so I had gone to lots of campuses as like a middle schooler, and high school, just going to different campuses to watch him play. So I always knew that college was for me. Like I knew that I was going to go to college.
Yeah.
And I think you knew, particularly coming from immigrant families, there aren't options.
It's not an option. It is
it's like a doctor or a lawyer.
Yes.
Like wherever you go.
To the point where my high school graduation was not celebrated because it was just an expectation that was met and not something to celebrate.
Like eventually when you go to the college one, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And so, so I did a lot of exploring of campuses, even like junior colleges as well, like just different places that we got to go and visit. So I knew it was something that I was aspiring to, but I also knew how different one campus was from the next.
Right. Yeah, that exposure is
right.
I mean, once you're on campus, it's a completely different experience than just, sliding through pictures online. And if you have that opportunity, for sure, take it at every chance you have. Not everyone gets the opportunity to visit every school.
And I did do a college for weekend at Liberty University.
And that sold you, huh?
I don't know what sold me. I did enjoy my time there. I still have friends.
I know. I'm joking.
From when I was a student there, that I still talk to this day, but I also still talk to my roommates and friends that I met at UT. And I think that's the beauty of when you're at such a large school, you find your niche. Right. You find your little area. But it also depends on you as a person. I think, for me, being at a big school was great because it was very important for me to have a diverse group. And I remember one time one of my roommates came home and she said, I was in my class today, and one of the things they asked, it was about media. She was a film major, and she said one of the things they asked in class was like, how many of you live with like someone of a different ethnic group of you? And she was like, I was the only person that raised my hand. And so like in our house, like for us, we were of all different cultures and economic backgrounds. And so it just, but that was something that was important to me and for us, obviously, and something that we sought out. And so being at a large school was really helpful to foster that. But I think if that's something that's interesting to you, then that is something that you would look for and seek out. But it just wasn't that way, right, for other people. And so like smaller campuses just make that really easy. But even so, like there was classes I had at UT. Again, it was a really large enrollment. And so my English class on campus, like you could get like, they were doing it based on like, well, what year are you and what's your social security number? Oh, wow. And if it's between these two numbers, like it was like a thing. But my class was like maybe 20 people. We met in a conference room. Like, and so, but then I had other classes at UT where it was in an auditorium and there was like 400 people. Right. So, it just really kind of ran the gamut of how you make that experience. So there was some of it that was very intimate, and then some of it was just large scale. Yeah. But those were like weed out classes.
That's kind of the same at Tulane. I think those more general courses where everyone has to get into the same class, has to get the same credits, those are going to be pretty big. I mean, some of the classes were in auditoriums also. And then you have your sort of majors and your specializations. And then those are teensy little groups of maybe 12 sometimes around a conference table. And those feel really intimate, and I liked the learning experience that I had in those smaller groups. I'm not going to raise my hand if there's 399 other people in a classroom. I'm not going to do it. But I have a lot of opinions to share at a conference table of 12. Lots. So, I think campuses offer a little bit of everything. And
They do. They tend to. And again, that's where it's important to aware of what you find, what you figure out, and how that works for you. And that's why it's so important to look at how you match up. So another thing that we kind of wanted to go into as well is then that's just us as students.
Right.
Us as professionals. Can you believe it? Like as real professionals, and then seeing students come to campus. Like it was, honestly, you would run the absolute gamut when it came to students. I feel now for that housing director. As I walk in, I was like, so where are you going to put me? Yeah. And it's like, how do you not know?
Right.
And, why would you know? Right. Like, again, it was a part of the whole packet for my other school. So I thought it would be a part of the whole packet here. And then also, on the flip side of that, I did ended up staying in a study lounge.
Oh.
And Jester that had like beds in there. And we had closets, which is also really weird now that I think about it. And we had we didn't have a bathroom, but none of Jester at that time didn't have bathrooms. We had a sink. And then I didn't bring much because they were like, so when a space opens up, you'll get moved into your door.
This only makes me think of my favorite story from when we worked together, and just the lack of planning for packing.
When I left, the semester ended. When I left, I literally left with a duffel bag because that's all I brought. It's all I had by that point because I was supposed to move. And then they sent me a check back for like the amount of housing I didn't get to have for the semester, which, who knew colleges did that?
You know what? You were resourceful. You made do. It's part of growth.
We did. It was, yeah. So because we were on campus, though, we got dibs on where we would live. And so that's when I ended up living in Kinsolving the next year. So I actually did live in a dorm, like a real dorm.
I don't know that I know the names of any of my dorms. I think that blacked it right out. Just not need to know.
Fair. I mean, was it pleasant? I mean, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, in the moment, but then you look back and you're like, wow, those conditions were pretty rough.
Was, and it's really funny actually because we make fun of college students all the time, like starving student, which that's not funny.
No,
actually,
they are hungry. Yeah.
Right, like these are hungry children, or And then again, being older and learning about kids who like didn't have anywhere to go during the summer.
Right.
And being like, why would you stay here? And then, you have to move out for the dorms for a certain amount of time. And it's like, well, they have nowhere else to go, because it didn't come to my mind as a kid that there would be like students who were homeless, right? Or like it just didn't cross my mind.
Everyone's journey is pretty different, and
Or
it's like we all go to the same school. We all go to the same school, and it feels like you're all on the same boat, but really it's not necessarily true. And some of that is like the financial burden that colleges can take on a person. I know, like, you and I had very different financial approaches to school, and I had to take on debt in order to study, which was like the expectation. So it's not like I was blindsided by it, but it's a burden that some people carry for almost the rest of their lives after school. And I graduated in really just the perfect timing of 2008. Really a good time
Katrina
to have a degree. And it was really difficult. I mean, I had a job at a nonprofit, thankfully, making much less than the tuition that I paid the year before. And I had a weekend job at a shoe boutique just to like help ends meet. And I was just kind of hustling afterwards. And I think, part of what we'll discuss in more in depth in more episodes will be that sort of return on investment and financial burden of going to university and making sure that you are making the right financial decisions. And looking at all of the options, because, of course, the United States has a plethora, thousands of accredited schools to choose from, but the rest of the world also has highly ranked accredited universities for potentially a lot less cost. And so we want everyone to consider all of their options. And you do need to consider the financial impact of what the degree will cost. And, I'm thankful that I had a pretty large scholarship covering the majority of my costs while I was at school. So it wasn't this, lifelong sort of burden on me to pay it off. So I'm thankful for that. And I know that, Rakia, you had a completely different, approach to it too.
Right. So I was very fortunate. My family was able to cover the costs. So I never had to take out any student loans or any student debt. It was very interesting, though, because I think as I talk to people about this, and I don't know how people's reaction is sometimes when I say, oh, yeah, I didn't take out student loans. I was able to get my degree. And I don't know if it's being a woman or if it's being a Black woman. There's a lot of different responses to that.
It's not like good for you. It's never like one response.
It's never so you could afford college.
Yeah.
That's never anyone's first thought.
No.
For sure. And so like being able, I remember one time, this is when working my first job right out of college, which was just a receptionist at a real estate company. And one of the coworkers, her daughter was about to start applying to colleges. And so she was like, how does student loans work? And I was like, well, I don't know.
I don't know.
I didn't do student loans. And then she was just very confused. Because, I mean, to be fair, like that is an expectation that people would go and take out loans in order to go to college. And she was like, well, how did you get a lot of scholarships? And I said, well, no. Actually, I didn't really. I was like, I probably should have applied to college. I didn't, though. Yeah. I was like, we just, we would just get a bill. Now, also to be fair, I was going to college in the 90s.
Oh,
a lot cheaper than what college expenses are now.
No.
Right.
And we will also be going into the
student loan debt and what that means and
the inflation of college costs and all of that, because, there's a big rabbit hole that we would love to explore.
Yeah, right. And it was now also when I was going to the private Christian university out of state, significantly more expensive than when I was going to UT, which is a public institution in state, right? So that made a huge difference, and just the cost was smaller or just lower. But it's just kind of interesting that I didn't, and not having that later in life allowed me to have jobs where I wasn't making a whole lot of money because I didn't have
Right.
the burden of debt behind me, and for college camp for school. And just even now, like talking to friends that I went to school with who are just now finishing paying up their student loans. And we're like, in our 40s, like we're not, to be fair, one of the friends who recently paid hers off, she went on and got a master's and then also like started working on a PhD. And so she had done a lot of schooling that she was taking out loans for. But even that, like, just as we know, like not having debt frees you up for a lot of other things in general. Like just not having that money going out of your door every month, as you know. But I think that's also just one of the things that makes this whole journey just very interesting with the two of us, like just kind of going through
a lot of different perspectives,
like how that worked in the perspective of it and the timing, even like going to school in the 90s versus going to schools
in the knots,
the aughts.
Oh, is it the aughts? Oh, it is the
aughts, the 99, 2000.
I call it the knots because you should not have graduated in 2008. It was a rough time,
right? Like 01 was 9/11.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's, when did
I was in high school.
You were in high school, so I probably was out of college by then.
We're not that far apart. No, but it's, it was a rough time, but I think I can relate a lot now to some of the students graduating into this economy because there's so much uncertainty. There's all these this nervousness about the economy. There's all of this shakeup with artificial intelligence. And so I think that especially now for students graduating with a degree, they do not have that sort of expectation that they're gonna get that job right away, have a good salary right away. I think that there's a lot of fear, and that I can 100% relate to that. Sure. Because
even right, like graduating during COVID.
That must have been very, very difficult.
Also, just a very wild experience. So, I mean, there's just been a lot of things, but I think that's also a good sign of like each generation has its own thing in which they have to deal with in some way, shape, or form. Right. So, yeah, how you recover and how you work yourself out of it.
Right. And I think,
right. And we're all in it together, like how the tides work in a lot of ways. I think I heard someone say, for young people, like, I don't really care about politics. And it's like, yeah, but your boss does. And so it's just, those things really affect you in ways that you're really unaware that it's going to affect you, and not even that you think about, because why would you?
Yeah. And to me, I think, there's this discussion, right? There's a narrative that a college degree does not have value or the same kind of value that it held previously.
Right.
And I still strongly believe that a degree has value. In the long term, the studies show that you are more insulated from the ups and downs of an economy, and it's sort of like an insurance, right? No one can take that degree away from you. You have the degree in hand, and there might be years where that's less, valuable, like 2008. But in the end, it has propelled me forward. And when I earned my master's degree, that very much propelled me forward into a completely, new level of my career. And, it might not be automatic necessarily. I didn't earn an MD and you become a doctor, right? I had more of a liberal arts degree, and it never hurt me to have a liberal arts degree. Right. It didn't give me maybe as defined a path as some other degrees do give you, but in the end, that degree has propelled me forward in my career, and it will do so, I think, for most people. And so until someone proves me otherwise, I think a college degree does have value, does add value to a person's life. It is not necessarily the right path for every single person, but I'm a massive proponent of it. But that doesn't mean that every single degree is, for any amount of money, is going to be a return on your investment.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think that's something that everyone has to consider.
I think, too, when it comes to earning degrees as a part of that discourse, which, I always say I worked in higher ed for over 10 years, and I will tell people, like, not earning a degree is right for everyone. But I will also say that sometimes the right thing at the wrong time can be the wrong thing. And so just because you're 20 years old and you don't want to earn a degree right now and you would like to work or get a trade, I wish I could have learned. Right now, hairstylists are killing it. I wish I had that skill, because you can take that skill anywhere, right? Like you can go anywhere with that. But I would still go to school because I could still get a degree at 25. Colleges are still open. And I think that's the thing too, is like when people like, well, I went, that's great, but you can still earn a degree. Like colleges are still accepting students. They're still accepting adults.
Right.
Like it doesn't mean that never. Sometimes things just aren't the right time.
Right.
But also, until billionaires and millionaires stop sending their children to school, then I think we can have a conversation of, is it worth it? Because if they are, then it's worth it. It matters somewhere to somebody.
Matters to them,
that they're still sending their kids to college. So I think that's also really important and really access.
Absolutely.
And opportunity that college grants you, and being around other people in that sphere is also invaluable. It's intangible. I don't know if there's a price that you can put on that.
Right, that's priceless. Just have access to those inside people. Right.
I went to Texas. The Bush daughter, W's daughters were going to Texas at the same time. Well, one of them. That puts you in a sphere of people that in one way that you're all right, like you're all level, you're all in class together. And so the professors that you interact with, I've got job opportunities through professors that I've worked with or was in class with, recommendations. If nothing else, if you want to get a master's, if you want to get your MBA, you still got to get a bachelor's degree first.
Right.
And just having recommendations from your professors, like those sorts of things, I don't think people talk about. That's an intangible cost. Right. An intangible benefit to going to college is just being around people and getting your perspective. You know, I was a buddy to international students when I was in.
Of course you were. Go on.
An undergrad, right? You know, I love international things.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, the very first time I think my faith was challenged is trying to explain to someone why you hide eggs at Easter.
It's a fun one.
None of it makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. It's not fun. It's great. And really, with the price of eggs, people should be dying rocks. But like,
those things you never think about.
It just doesn't make any sense. What does this have to do with Jesus' resurrection? Yeah. I don't know, kid. Go find it.
You know, we all need to ask ourselves some questions.
True. And I know that there's like, blah, blah, blah. There's some historical pieces that go to it. But I mean, if you don't know that, and then someone's looking for you from China, it's like, so why am I doing this?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
Good point. Yeah. No, those connections that you're making and those like new perspectives that you're learning and the exposure to all these people is so valuable.
Right.
And yeah, I think especially, and we'll go into this in other episodes, but especially for women, especially for minorities, especially for women and minorities,
and underprivileged
and underprivileged people, it is a ticket into another, you know, into the room at the table. It gives you a seat at the table, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and that you're not necessarily going to get without it. And so it's hard to say, like, you know, it's not worth anything, because at the very least it gets you in a door that you might not have gotten into. Right. So, you know, there's
not that you couldn't do it. It's just much harder to have done it.
Absolutely.
And to know that college comes along with the privilege, right? Like absolutely. I was talking to my cousin, and his college roommate didn't come back. And the whole time he was there, like his parents actually really didn't want him to go to college because they had like this lawn care business and they wanted his labor as a part of this lawn care business. Right. And he was like, I just don't get like, well, you know, having a degree is going to be better in the long run and he'd be able to take over the business. And I said, yeah, but you realize it's a privilege to be able to wait that 4 years before you have to start working, right? Because people need to eat
cost
now. Right? Like they need to do something now.
Yeah.
And so his parents should have more of a long-term view, which would make more sense.
Right.
However, I understand how they're like, but we can't wait 4 years of just sending you money.
There is a cost to not working those 4 years.
Right.
And a privilege to have those 4 years to not work, to work only on yourself,
Right.
to work on like getting in tune with who you are and what you want to do, and
Learning
just
who you are.
learn for 4 years. I mean, it's like, I don't know, wealthy women who go to these like 4-month-long retreats. Like, who has the time? This is like 4-year retreat for yourself.
Yes.
It is a treat. Like, it is a privilege. And take those 4 years, if you have them, and reflect on everything, learn as much as you can, absorb, and then get a degree and head out, into the real world where things get real fast, right?
Yes,
but at the end of the day, our philosophy is that this is a meaningful journey. It is a meaningful relationship. It is a powerful tool to have a degree in your hand. And we want to make sure that we are giving students across the board an even playing field. We're giving them access to literally every single accredited university in the entire world that are teaching fully English taught degrees, and that have the same level of prestige as American universities. There are thousands of universities out there, and we want to make sure and educate all of these students about all of their options, and then they can make the right choice about the one and their little college soulmate and move forward from that point, right? So that's, I think, what we want to bring in our podcast and in our entrepreneurship when we're kind of bringing Batch to the world. So, we appreciate everyone listening.
And take this journey with us. It'll be transformative like college. There's no other time of your life that's like it. I mean,
Correct.
There just really isn't. So, I just want to make sure that
we'll be your guides.
We'll be your guides. your auntie.
Oh,
helping you out.
We're old enough to be aunties now. That's true.
At least I am. I'm not sure about you.
So youthful. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll bring you more episodes soon.
We'll be back again. I'm Rakia Johnson, co-founder of Bach Education.
And I'm Sophie Roth, co-founder of Bach Education.
And this is
To a Degree.
To a Degree.